Welcome to the Joanne Avison podcast. In the previous episode in this series, we explored the energetic body, not as something abstract or esoteric, but as lived, embodied experience. We looked at how sensation, awareness, and perception are all felt through fascia as the body reorganises itself naturally toward coherence. So today, we're going to take that exploration one step further, because once we begin to sense energy as organisation rather than idea, a deeper question naturally arises. How does that organisation take shape? This is where sacred geometry enters the conversation. Not as symbols or beliefs, but as the underlying blueprint through which the body actually expresses coherence, actually is shaped and formed, and how it expresses relationship. What we are really exploring here is how lived energetic experience becomes structural, spatial, and embodied. Sacred geometry is not just about pretty patterns, much as they look beautiful in 2D arrangements and drawings and symbols. It is about how the form arises from relationship and the profound and significant principle of self-organisation that every single one of us used to become. That is essentially how matter self-organises or organises itself into living coherence. It's how simple mathematical relationships give rise to highly complex biological structures. Life does not ever organise itself in straight lines. It forms through curves, spirals, toroidal folds, spheres, branching tubular networks, lattices, and fields that emerge from the individual aspects of those relationships combined. And they are called emergent properties. Let me explain exactly what that is. An emergent property is when individual elements come together and the result of their relationship or their correlation expresses properties in the whole that were not present in the individual elements. This is a really crucial understanding. An emergent property is a characteristic of a complex system that appears only when its individual components interact as a whole, but it isn't present in the parts. For example, think of a cell, a living cell in our body. It can metabolize, it can reproduce. Now, the individual components of the cell cannot necessarily do that. But when all the individual proteins, the lipids, the organelles, the aspects of it that make it up all come together as a whole, these features are known as an emergent property or emergent properties of that cell. So the human body is not a mechanical object constructed from parts. It is a self-organising biological continuum with a vivid and vital architecture that brings together the animated being expressing. And that being is invariably unique, which ironically makes us all the same. And it is in a unique place, at a unique time, in a unique pattern of our unique matter at all times. The fascia is the tissue of the body that reveals this most clearly. It's the organ of organisation that forms the field in which all the elements can come together in their geometric patterns. So whether they are regular polyhedrons or irregular polyhedrons, they come together in constant flux and expression and interactive vitality. Consider that it contains us while it is contained by us, and when the blueprint is coherent with who we are, the effect can be palpable. Fascia and the fascia matrix is often described as the wrapping of muscles or organs or bones or vessels. And actually, there's aspects of that language that's deeply misleading. Fascia does not just wrap separate parts held together by the torso or a limb. Fascia is the fabric of their very continuity, connected always in between all the so-called parts that it unites and organises. It's like the interface within which all structures form, communicate, and remain in relationship throughout the body, throughout our lives. Nothing in your body is truly separate. The fascia wrapping the heart becomes the tongue above it, and it spirals below the heart to form the diaphragm. And the diaphragm is continuous with the organs that sit beneath it in the pictures. Its tissues become the outpouchings of the viscera. This is readily demonstrable in the anatomy lab with appropriate preservation. The deepest matrix within each muscle does not form as isolated units of muscle fibres or fibrils or sarcomeres. Instead, it forms different textures and qualities and regions of a continuous fabric on every scale. And in the anatomy laboratory, these separations into different forms or areas or regions are cut into place by the anatomist. They never exist or function in isolated places or structures in the body, even though they work together with unique roles. And this is hard to get, but a great example of why this can be difficult to understand is that the fascia wraps things purposefully, and it has different textures so that it can act as a filter in one area or a barrier in another, as well as a wrapping, all at the same time. Some structures, such as the centre of a spinal disc, are designed to stay enclosed and support and feed only that specific area. When something ruptures due to overcompression or tears due to overextension, that particular texture in that area can lose its specific integrity. And at the same time, it also loses its geometric pattern, which is designed very specifically to serve a particular purpose in a particular area of the body. We don't have to learn this. It's revealed very clearly in the anatomy lab if we receive the information instead of looking for and cutting out what we think is there. The body reveals its patterns, but they can be difficult to understand because as soon as we cut it up, we're breaking up the very pattern and the very integrity that we're seeking to see. It is a true conundrum. The one ubiquitous, persistently variable, organic, geometric, organising principle is the fascia, the whole matrix. This is not a metaphor. It is an anatomical reality. Nothing in living biology forms in straight lines. Although forces can move through the roundness of the tissue, seeking the path of least resistance and following the geometric patterns of the biology. These are known as geodesic patterns sometimes. And forces move through all the forms of us. That doesn't mean the forms are linear. There are no levers, no pin joints, and absolutely no mechanical type pumps or pistons in non-linear biologic forms. Ever. Life forms patterns of geometry, not robotic levers. Cells, organelles in cells, muscles, bones, and the different structures between them do not ever organise in levers anywhere in any living form. Naturally, tissues do not behave on this outdated mechanical basis. Organs do not function as isolated units. Life is non-linear by nature, and biology is only ever based on non-linear soft matter forms. That's how we adapt, as all living creatures have to do. We are bioemotional organisms. We are formed, informed, transformed, and reformed continuously through motion, through fluidity, through pressure and tension and relationship of the relentlessly connecting structural interplay. of our living geometric architecture within the living geometric architecture of the cosmos. And each aspect of it is uniquely expressed as a different, changing and changeable texture within us. In my book, Yoga, Fascia, Anatomy and Movement, I call it living architecture because we can even tell if there's a problem due to the texture of the human fabric. And it works best when it's appropriate to the area it's in and the purpose it's for and the person it resides within. Linear biomechanics simply cannot explain a living human being moving, period. That's just true. Now, Dr. Jean-Claude Gamberteau created some endoscopic work revealing something extraordinary when he released his first video, Strolling Under the Skin, to the public. When we look inside living tissue, we do not see static scaffolding, even though fascia is often described as that. We see something Dr. Gamberteau described as a constantly adapting microvacuolar collagenic absorption system. I know. In other words, a liquid crystal matrix in constant flux, a liquid crystal architecture that changes shape, changes pressure and changes geometry as the body moves in micromotility of the organs within the micromobility of the whole body, from breath to bouncing. Move a foot and the neck reorganises. Shift the breath and the abdomen responds. Nothing behaves in isolation. Even that which doesn't move, when you are focused on what does, is playing an active role in order to be passive and still. That's a key. I'm going to say it again. When you choose to isolate a movement, the rest of your body is actively still. That matters. This changes the math, the physics, and the biology of anatomy as it's described in 20th century principles. 21st century anatomy is a whole nother thing. Sacred geometry is actually found throughout all living forms, just as it says in the ancient wisdom that preceded classical biomechanics, and we turn to it now. And I've talked about it in several other episodes. As an overall principle, it honours the 5 regular polyhedrons, often called the 5 Platonic solids. But if you consider these as the 5 Platonic volumes, it becomes easier to think of them because they represent fundamental organisational possibilities and patterns for all crystalline structures in nature. That is, solid crystals of minerals and liquid crystals such as bound water found in living beings, animals, vegetables, flora and fauna. So consider cellulose to a plant, or think about mycelium to the forest, and fascia to an animal or a human as the architectural organisation of and in these different textures, all patterned to form different types of living matter based in these long-known geometries. Living fascia does not behave as a pile of fixed regular solids that can stack or interlock. That's not the kind of architecture we're describing here, because we're mostly made of water. That's more like an apartment block at right angles to the ground, or a cathedral that has to stand up based on its overall patterns being static and stacked. Humans are neither of those things. We are not static, nor stacked, nor stable in living, changing, constantly adapting form. Living architecture behaves as an infinite field of irregular polyhedrons, constantly adapting, reorganising and flowing in form. And there is one key polyhedron among the 5 so-called Platonic solids that are much better understood as volumes that doesn't lock to a form, a fixed crystalline pattern. It is instead the shape of constant flux. It's the one designed to move and vibrate. It's the only one that cannot lock or tessellate, as it's called. It's the icosahedron. That is the one that permits something we might call water-based geometry. It can preserve a range of fluidity under very specific conditions. It's the one that will not tessellate in patterns like we see the others form. It's the one that flows. So we are essentially water organised into form that can flow to an extent and changes constantly. And that is the brilliant foundation of our sacred geometry in dynamic instability, dancing with poise or equilibrium from moment to moment. That's us. Movement is not something we do on top of structure. Movement is the sign of life expressing itself through our structure, our sacred geometric organisation. Fascia is a liquid crystal matrix. It's all soft matter, partly appearing more solid and partly appearing more fluid, but it's never separate from the water that composes us in its bound, changeable, adaptable form. It conducts information, it distributes force, it transmits mineral exchange and organises form as a structurally intelligent matrix, bound together but nevertheless changeable. It's able to bound and be bound and bind and bounce off the ground, and it's bound to return in gravity. It is not filler. Fascia is not packaging. It is not background tissue. It is the primary medium of embodiment. Every breath we take changes us moment by moment. Every move we make shifts the balances movement by movement. It's almost incomprehensible. It is so brilliant and so refined. Every human begins as a single spherical cell. What Emeritus Professor Jaap van der Waal describes as a unicellular being, a perfect geometric form, a perfect geodesic whole. Structural integrity is innate to that. From that form emerges complexity through the organisational principles of sacred geometry. It relentlessly mimics the universal principles inside our microcosmos and in the cosmos we reside within. Calcium cascades, ionic exchanges, mineral patterning, and fluid dynamics create the architecture of the whole body as it forms and as we are forming it. In progress, in process, in life, we are not built from separate parts that are put together. We are not a divide and conquer creature. There's no such living thing on this planet. We grow from the unifying and multiplying relationships that we self-organise from the outset. It's already that way. It always has been. Sacred geometry is not something imposed on us. It's how we bring ourselves into being, and we can reveal it if we know what we're looking for. And when we experience injury or shock or fear or emotional holding, we do not simply remember it or analyse it mentally. The fascial matrix adapts accordingly in the moment and thereafter. It holds pattern. It knots relationship. It changes this organisation. It gasps a breath in recognition of an arrested process, stopped in its natural flow or recreation. These are not failures. They're survival strategies that we can all use for safety and preservation. Nevertheless, when safety returns, we can forget that we are now the result of the adaptation to manage those situations. And this exquisitely complex multidimensional network also has exceptional powers of recovery and restoration. Those knots in the neck can sometimes soften, especially from within, not through force, not through command, but through relationship, through attention, through presence, through kindness to ourselves, through awareness. It's an awareness in motion, and it's an awareness of motion, because we're not designed for static balance like statues. We're designed for dynamic instability and adaptation, for continuous rebalancing in motion, and this is called allostasis. Bioemotional intelligence, that we went into in the last episode, includes and is based in the very sacred geometry that we're describing. It's already there. It's naturally expressed through living tissue architecture. It's the body's capacity to naturally reorganize itself toward coherence when it feels safe enough to do so. We do not need to work out how to embody fascia. We already are fascia embodied. We do not need to imagine sacred geometry and work it out. We are already living it. It's the pattern of our cells organising and reorganising themselves within us, organised with, by, and as our liquid crystal fascia matrix. Living beings, being defined as such because they are moving and breathing, are respiriting. You already are sacred geometry in motion, and awakening to that awareness is a game changer. Not just symbolically, not even philosophically, biologically. If you would like to sense this quietly, notice your body not as a posture or a position, but as living relationship with you, as a continuous form in space. Notice whether that form feels organised, fluid, dense, or fragmented. There's no need to correct it. Just notice it. Breathe into it. And let that breath simply be an open question. Awareness alone changes relationship. And fascia responds to relationship, to presence, to simply breathing in and out quietly. Sacred geometry is not a spiritual overlay on the body. It's the language or the grammar of the language through which life organises itself into form. The cellulose of a plant, the fascia of you, the mycelium of the forest, they all have unique languages, your body. And we'll consider that in later episodes where we engage practically with it. Using movement to ask questions and see how it answers in its own language is fascinating. And fascia is the tissue that allows that language to remain alive and adaptive and responsive and be spoken by you in your unique dialect. We are not mechanical beings seeking spirituality. We are sacred geometry expressing itself physically, emotionally, and spiritually through the living tissue that acts as our guardian, our companion, and our creative expression all at once. It's a kind of genius you already have. And in this episode, we've explored the fascia as the sacred geometric blueprint of embodiment. And in the next and final episode of this series, we'll bring this exploration into the nervous system. We'll look at how fascia, perception, structure, and organisation shape our capacity for self-regulation, for natural resilience, and for creating inner safety. Because coherence is not just something we sense or understand and apply. It is something that our living nervous systems must be able to live within. I can't wait to see you in the next episode. Don't forget to click the subscribe button so that you don't miss anything. And I wish you well. Bring the comments, love to hear them. God bless you wherever you are.